My Welsh nan, she was a young musical person in our family when I was younger, but she was a naughty nan. She used to play the piano in the dining room when my granddad wasn't there, to me and my brother and some of our nephews, and she'd always play this naughty song about the cat shitting in the garden. Now, just the memory of her kind of plonking around the piano, probably really badly at the time, that still sticks with me now. She was such a free spirit as well. So I kind of associate that music with kind of fun and enjoyment, and initially with my nan and being in Wales, which is where where half my family lives.
Yes, actually, my brother Nigel, who's 5 years older than me, has been quite a significant feature in my life in music from a young age. Not always with my best interests at heart, I would say.
Yeah, I was taken to a concert, and I remember listening to, I think it was some harpsichord, and it might have been some Bach, and the music was so relaxing that I could just feel myself drifting into this very lovely place.
My first memory goes back to when I was 9. My uncle was quite a prolific jazz pianist, fairly famous in the Midlands, and he had this upright piano, and he treated himself to a grand piano, and he offered my mother his old upright piano. So this piano just magically turned up, and my brother, who was 2 years older than me, we both just jumped all over it. We loved it. And so my mother says, well, why don't we send them to piano lessons? So we did, and then I was very lazy, to be honest. I always used to go and play tennis and football and never practice, whereas my brother Stephen, he was always practicing hard. But unfortunately, I seemed to be the one that was always getting better faster. I guess I probably had more of a natural talent for it.
Yeah, my dad was in a band. So I remember going to one of his rehearsals actually, and taking part in a rehearsal. That was one of my first, not my first, but it was one of my memories of music. He played a lot of calypso. I think he played a lot of covers, to be honest. There was a few maybe originals, but I think he was more of a covers band. I don't think he really knew that I could play that well. Then I went in, and the drummer that was the band's drummer was like really impressed, and I ended up playing one of the songs, playing a track on one of his shows after that.
Definitely parent, because my mother could have been a concert pianist. She did that classic thing that women did in the 1950s, got married and gave up all her dreams to be married, because that's what women tended to do those days. Although she was a very talented pianist, classical pianist, and she's a pretty good opera singer, light opera singer as well, which she continues to do in her 80s. But it was her piano playing was the first thing in the house that was my memory of music. And listen to the radio as well, of course, you know.
So, first memory, probably mum and dad's playing me things like the Commodores. Yeah. So they're not musical, but they were into their music. So we had sort of a wide range of stuff that we listened to, but no background in music. But my brother and I, became obsessive about music very early on. So, and they encouraged us. So we got piano lessons early on when we were kids, which we gave up pretty quickly.
Well, I'm an only child, which probably explains a lot. But yeah, always been interested in music right from a very young age. Always sang from being a very young age. In fact, my mum sometimes would say that to one of my old neighbours heard me singing Tom Jones's Delilah when I was a little boy, murder ballad, as I was sort of playing in the garden, and I was singing it with gusto. So yeah, I've always liked singing and seem to have sung from a very young age. So
yeah, I can. I remember this really vividly. I was around 6 years old, and my dad used to play me all kinds of classical music, but mainly romantic classical, and I was lying on the floor with headphones on, and I think I was listening to Halt the Planets. It's this really cool piece of music, and I had something of a visionary experience. I forget which movement it was, but I was listening to a climax in the music, and I saw this comet go, and it was really incredible kind of visual experience. And I thought, I remember distinctly at 6, I kind of find it hard to believe, but I remember then thinking, I want to keep enjoying this feeling as much as possible and make music to reproduce it for others. because also at the same time, my dad would always improvise on this piano, and I would try and copy him and try and push him off sometimes. And I just got lost for hours a day playing the piano, finding different frequencies. I give my father full credit for everything that's happened, really. He plays violin and piano and loves improvising, and he introduced me to lots of great music and to improvising on the piano.
When I was really young, I was interested in, I used to listen to a lot of classical music, oddly enough. That was a thing that I first began noticing, rather than kind of rock or pop music. I chose Beethoven's First Symphony, not because I'd heard it. It's simply because there was a bust of Beethoven on the front, like a bronze kind of statue, and he looked really cool. That's why I chose it, because he looked good. I was a kid, that's what gravitated me. Yeah.
And my brother levered me into the choir. He nagged and nagged at me to go and audition. And I couldn't think of anything worse than spending my Sundays, in a sort of a ruff and gown and all that lot. But he seemed to get very upset that I wouldn't, go and sort of show how well I could sing. So I auditioned and got in, and spent a couple of years as part of this church choir. I only found out many years later that he was being paid a finder's fee. They were short of choir boys, and so were paying £5 or something, which is a lot of money then, for anybody that could get some choir boys in that could sing a little bit.
I remember my dad used to have an 8-track machine, which I barely know what that is, let alone people younger than us. Yeah. But it was the first time I could listen to music repeatedly as a youngster, and the only thing he had was a John Denver 8-track. So, I mean, don't tell anybody this, that I started off listening to John Denver, but that was the first music I could really listen to on repeat.
Country Road?
Yeah, and Matthew, it was kind of, it's a bit embarrassing now, but at the time, being able to listen to something over and over again and get to know it and get to know the lyrics and I've got fond memories of that as well. So it's not quite as cool as having a sweary nanny, but John Denver was a pretty cool start as well.
I think I remember most of all from that. The church had a good organist and a pretty nice church organ, and I think it kind of got into me, that sort of musical style with a sort of quite big passages of music and sort of thunderous bass pedals in the organ, and I think it became part of my musical DNA in a funny way. It sort of seeped into me.
Oh, Susie Quattro, yeah.
Susie Quattro, excellent, brilliant. And what about Susie Quattro was?
Oh, it was just great. It was just, I can't even remember the track name, but it was just, I loved it. Her energy, the energy was amazing.
So did you start wearing black leather and?
No, I was too young for that.
I think it might have been Motown Chartbusters Volume 3.
Right.
Got the Supremes on it, and those Motown things I think caught my ear as a child very much, because they're just such good songs. They're still really like a quality of songwriting you don't often hear in pop music. And so I liked those things, Marvin Gaye, early Marvin Gaye, that sort of thing. And pretty soon I think somebody bought me for Christmas an album by The Who called The Who Sellout. It's the one with Roger Daltrey sitting in a giant tub of baked beans on the cover, and they've all got these fake adverts on the cover. Pete Townsend with a giant roll-on, and that had I Can See for Miles on it, and that's a great record too. So that was my first introduction to rock music, really.
Well, basically, it's an album by Stevie Wonder called Hotter Than July. Now, I remember one of my first girlfriends, her dad had a really cool record collection. I was just starting to delve into music and starting to understand music a bit better. I wasn't actually playing at that time, but I remember having this Hotter Than July album. There's some great tunes on that, like all Stevie albums, it's just incredible. So I listened to that a few times, and then I just had to buy it when I got my first stereo as a kid, which had a record deck and everything. That was the first album I bought, and I still listen to that album now. I'm still a massive Stevie Wonder fan.
Oh, gosh. All right, the first one I can really remember being totally obsessed with was Queen. Queen were the band for me and my brother. I was obsessed with them, when I was a kid.
And can you remember focusing on any one of them in the band?
Definitely Roger Taylor and John Deacon. They were the two, not the guitarist, not Freddie Mercury. I thought he was amazing voice, but it was the drummer and the bass player. They're the ones. Every time I looked at the album sleeves, I'd be looking. Oh, Yeah, so it's a strange one, but I love their overall sound. But it was, you know, drums, bass were obviously an obsession, or something I got into very, very quickly.
So the rhythm section was the thing.
Rhythm section, big time. So, you know, Sting was a big person for me as well, and Copeland. You know, yeah, it was the rhythm section that always used to kind of get me. Yeah.
Oh wow, first single album. I think it was actually Jean-Michel. So first there was all that classical music.
Yeah.
So at first my dad introduced me to loads of composers and symphonies, but after that my first one was a Jean-Michel Jarre record. I think it was Jean-Michel Jarre live in Hong Kong,
right.
Which is kind of random. I'm now married to someone from Hong Kong, so
right.
It makes a nice kind of sense. But yeah, that was the first one. And it was my first time hearing electronic music, so I suddenly thought, wow, I don't just... It's not just about writing note information, that there's someone out there who's making sounds and using electronics in a different way to what I thought was possible.
So the first single I bought was an instrumental thing, I think in maybe 77, a band called Space, and the A-side was called Magic Fly, and the B-side was called, it was actually the B-side I really liked, it's a ballad for space lovers I think, and it was kind of a Jean-Michel Jarre style thing, but I dialed it up a few months ago. Actually, it's on Spotify, and the B-side still a strong piece of music. Actually, still liked it. But the first album I had actually stole again from my brother. I stole it from him, and that was "Selling England by the Pound" by Genesis. And I still remember the moment. For me, he used to. In fact, he went and bought that album. Much to the disgust of his friends who wanted him to buy Nevermind the Bollocks, which had just come out then. And Nigel had his £2 or whatever for a vinyl. And instead he bought Selling England by the Pound, so he brought it home. And he used to have these incredibly long baths, and he'd have the bedroom door open, and so he could hear his vinyl playing extremely loud. And I remember I was walking up the stairs and I heard a little guitar thing, da-da-da-da-da-da, from a song called Dancing with the Moon at Night, which is a sort of a classic prog tune, and that it stopped me in my tracks, and I thought this is really interesting, and so I stole the album and dived into it, and from on that album was very much a kind of rock version of the sort of stuff that I was listening to in the church choir, so from '77 onwards I started buying an awful lot of vinyl albums and a few singles which I still got at home, and broadened my sort of collection.
Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson, Destiny. I think it was, the album was Destiny. Yeah. I am a big fan of Michael Jackson still. I love everything he does. So that's what did it. I just loved everything about him. His singing, his way he danced, his whole way he performed. You just couldn't take your eyes off him once you started watching him. So yeah, I just loved everything about him.
My friend's brother, a guy called Ian Radford, was a big influence on me. His listening pleasures and listening tastes were things that I was exposed to. And he was a big fan of The Who. He was also a big fan of bands like The Sweet, weirdly enough. I think at that time they were sort of popular. And as you know, Steve, today at Real World, Andy Scott from The Sweet's in. So I thought it's ironic that he should be sitting having his lunch as we're kind of doing this. Ian was a big influence on me. And I say one of his big bands were The Who. And I liked The Who. I liked the energy of The Who. And I also liked the bombast, which was kind of similar between kind of Beethoven and that's the connection, the power and the energy there, the music, the power in the music, and so that was it. So my first 7-inch single I bought was Squeeze Box which is a song I think it's from Who by Numbers, but I got it on a Polydor 7-inch single, and on the B side. It was written by John Entwistle, so it's a song called Success Story, which is also on that album. But yeah, played it to death. And that was it. That's me kind of getting into the world of rock music and classical.
And do you still have that 7-inch single?
Still got them. Still got it. It's still in the white paper sleeve, and I decorated it, with like wrote The Who in it with little arrows coming out and a exploding pinball machine and all this. All there. All still got them. Still got the Beethoven thing as well.
I think it might have been ELO. I'm a big ELO fan, and I think it was probably Discovery. I think what I do like, and I still like about them, what I did like about them at the time, is there's a lot of drama and there's a lot of orchestration in there, and I've always been interested in orchestration. I just loved Mick Kaminsky's violin, the electric violins, and also the backing vocals. I love great backing vocals, and that vocal sound and the way it was produced by Jeff Lynne was just wow. That's why I liked it. And also, it's story music. The songs always told us a story. You know, Mr. Blue Sky, Wild West Hero. It's great songs. I will be brutally honest. I've never been a big gig-going guy. So it was probably very late on. After I came down to London, so I came down to London to study, so I might have been about 19 or 20. And I think it might have been, from memory, Neil Diamond at Wembley Arena in the round. And that was great. He was wonderful, wonderful voice.
Carlos Santana, I think it was, in Hammersmith. Yeah, that's when I can't remember who was playing with him. But that was I went with my best friends. We was into that Carlos Santana, Chick Corea, all them guys at that time. So yeah, that was an experience to watch him play live. It was like I was only a young kid in this big mass world. The place was massive, you know what I mean? And I've played there as well, which is really weird. So I've watched somebody there from a little kid, never knew that I would end up playing there. That's crazy. But yeah, that was my first gig.
Well, my family were very classical, as in, you know, they were Middle European. So we didn't go to gigs, we went to concerts. We lived in a tiny country town in Australia, so that would have been a very special event, perhaps 2 a year, with somebody driving all the way down to where we lived. I mean, our country town, and putting on a special concert, which was probably a trio, string trio or something, or Baroque music, something like that.
A little bit different to the Stevie vibe, but the first, it's actually 2 gigs I went to, pretty near to each other. The first was a band called Marillion, believe it or not.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, a bit proggy.
Yeah.
And I think I saw Crowded House around the same kind of time. But I just started playing then, and most of the musicians I was playing with when I first started playing were quite into kind of the prog rock stuff. Bands like Yes, and Marillion were obviously kind of a newer version, if you like. So I went and saw them. Where was it? I think it was the Wembley Arena. It was awful sound. It was just abysmal. But still, at that point in my life, I must have been 16. I think quite late for going to my first proper gig. But seeing a band like that, full of virtuoso musicians, and I went with a lot of friends who I was actually starting to play music with as well, because we were playing some of their music at the time. I mean, at that point in my career, I was interested in improving my skills as a musician. So music like that was challenging and was appealing to the kind of side of me that wanted to improve my skills and get better.
Back to Nigel. Should have got him to do the interview, really. I went to see the Jam at Stafford Bingley Hall, I think it was called. 78, something like that. I couldn't be sure about it, but you know, again, looking back, brotherly influence. I liked some of what I was hearing from the Jam. I mean, great band. Getting into live music as a teenager was a big turning point for me, and you know, something that I thought, wow, I found like a community here, sort of. And okay, in those days, maybe they were appealing to kind of new mods or something like that. I don't know, but it meant nothing to me particularly. I wasn't, you know, the division between sort of rock and mod and pop and whatever was irrelevant to me at that time.
First gig was Def Leppard. Def Leppard and Lionheart were supporting them, I remember that. And it was at the Ipswich Gaumont, and I was really young, but I can remember just couldn't believe it when I went into the arena, and then the drum kit was there. And just even to think it was going to be played, that was just magical. And I remember, Lionheart was supporting, and you probably never heard of Lionheart, but they were the first band, and then Def Leppard came on. It was a Hind tour, and I was just, you know, I was more into rock when I was younger. So seeing that gig, that was it.
And then I think after that I saw the Specials. I remember going to see it at Birmingham, New Street Odeon. Then I think I started to see some prog rock. I think I saw Steve Hackett at the Odeon as well. So all Midland gigs, had a great time. And then later on, when I was kind of 16, 17, my mum was great. She gave me a free rein to do whatever I wanted, really. And I used to go down to the Marquee even though I was still at school, and I'd get down to the Marquee and watch these gigs by bands like Marillion and 12th Night and IQ and Solstice and things. I'd get home, I wouldn't get home till sort of 4 or 5 in the morning, but I did that kind of most weeks, you know. It was a big part of my my kind of later teenage years was spent at the Marquee. It was great fun, really good.
Yeah, it was a school. There were a couple of kids in my year who were equally into rock, and I went to a De La Salle school, and so the brother was with us, Brother Owen. He was there. In fact, Brother Owen took us to Iron Maiden, like 666. Yeah, Iron Maiden as well, you know. So that was, he was amazing. He just knew that we were totally into, and he didn't take any offence. We didn't even think about it at the time. So only until after I thought, God, that's quite a leap for a brother to go to, you know.
Yeah, I can. That's funny. I was 12 years old, and it was an Orbital gig. My dad somehow got me and my friend, who was called Chris, into this venue, and I think my dad was the oldest person, and we were definitely the youngest. I don't know how we got in, because it's a lot stricter now. And I remember a woman there was kind of amazed at us and she kept pinching my friend's bum, which is kind of really random. But it was a great night. I bet. My brain was just exploded by the lights and the sound. And
it was Whitesnake, and I saw them in 1980, I think, and it was it was the Love Hunter tour, and I went with Ian Radford. It was great, you know, because I was also a fan of Deep Purple and things like Led Zeppelin and all those sorts of things, and so Whitesnake had got at that time, yeah, that's right, because Ian Pace, Deep Purple's drummer, had just joined Whitesnake, so it would have been, I think it was about 1980. So they got John Lord in there, Ian Pace, and David Coverdale. So I was delighted. Deep Purple were no longer in existence, so it's a good way of seeing, you know, as close you could get to as many Deep Purple members, ex-members, I guess, in one lineup as possible. It's fantastic. It's good.
I can remember very well because it was quite a spectacular thing to be exposed to as a first concert to go to. An older friend of mine at school invited me to go with him to see Alice Cooper and Roxy Music. So it was the year that Killer came out, and it was the first Roxy Music, time they'd made anything really. And we went to Wembley Arena and watched Roxy Music and Alice Cooper do Killer, which is where he had a guillotine and had his head chopped off, and he came out with a big top hat and a cane with a spike on it and a giant 6-foot balloon full of maggots which floated over the crowd, and he popped it and watched everyone scramble around trying to get the maggots out of their shirt. So we were some way back, but it was an overwhelming experience to see that.
Sounds like a weird combination, Roxy Music.
I guess. I mean, I think nobody knew who Roxy Music were then. I think friends of mine had showed me their record, and of course that very striking image of them all in the amazing clothes with the instruments in the middle, in the gatefold. Funnily enough, I got to know Brian Eno later in life. He's a friend now, and I credit him with any hearing loss I experienced early on as a child was definitely his fault, because he was playing synthesizer with Roxy Music then, and he had these old OB8 kind of, pinboard synthesizers. And the high frequency sound he made on that stage at Wembley, it just went straight through my head like someone shoving a knitting needle in my ear. Anyway, it was enjoyable and really interesting. And Alice Cooper I loved at the time anyway, just because of the guitars and the attitude and the fact that someone tried to ban him from coming to England because he was the most corrupt thing anyone had ever heard of. And of course that was all very exciting to me as a 13-year-old kid.
Bludgeon them with his positivity and idea. Yeah, come on,
you will do it.
Yeah, absolutely. So
Jedi mind trick.
Absolutely, yeah.